So the Emergencies Act was passed for the first time in Canadian history today, and that means that the government has greater control to deal with what it deems as emergencies. But to know what the Emergencies Act is, we first have to look at the War Measures Act, which was created in 1914, and it gave the government greater control during the First World War, and it essentially suspended civil liberties, but came just short of actually being martial law. It allowed the government to intern people who were deemed enemy aliens, including German Canadians, simply because they had German heritage. It was used again during the Second World War, and this time it was used to intern Japanese Canadians who were deemed enemy aliens because, again, they happened to have heritage that related to a current enemy of Canada. And in 1970 it was introduced by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau to deal with the October crisis created by the FLQ. And a lot of people weren't happy about it being invoked then. And in 1988, after the government apologized to Japanese Canadians for their internment during the Second World War, the War Measures Act was replaced by the Emergencies Act. So what is it? So while the Emergencies Act does give the government greater control, there are some key differences between it and the War Measures Act. First, a declaration of an emergency has to be reviewed by Parliament. And second, and arguably most importantly, any temporary laws that are created have to align with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So, essentially, any attempt to suspend civil liberties has to pass the reasonable and justified part of Section 1 of the Charter. On April 9, 2020, when the pandemic was in its very early stages, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did consult with the premiers about invoking the Emergencies Act, and actually consulting with the premiers is a requirement of the Emergencies Act. But it was never actually enacted, and now we actually have it enacted, so this is actually a pretty important day in Canadian history.